Expect to indulge like you mean it. At Trilogy by Shea Homes, it's easy for you to do what makes you the happiest. Trilogy has 4 vibrant communities in Arizona, located in Wickenburg, Santan Valley, Peoria, and Rio Verde. Each has its own look and feel, but all are city close and country quiet, with plenty of ways to have fun. Members of these gated resort lifestyle communities enjoy clubhouse amenities and social calendars filled with activities to share with friendly people just like you. With outdoor sports complexes, spas and fitness centers, and award-winning golf courses, you'll feel like you're on vacation every day. Visit one or more of Trilogy's 4 communities to see how you can enjoy the good life too. Trilogy at Wickenburg Ranch, Trilogy at Verde River, Trilogy at Vistancia, and Encanterra, a Trilogy resort community, each offering exciting new homes designed from the high 100s to the low 600s. Visit trilogylife.com/AZ to learn more. That's trilogylife.com/AZ.
Hello, my friends, and welcome to the next episode of A Bee in Eden. This show is part of the Storytellers Campfire Network, and it's being broadcast live today at Blog Talk Radio. We have been connecting the dots through history that show how empires have been built and then destroyed by those puppet masters who lurk in the shadows of the temple, those priesthoods of credit who have trapped all mankind into subservient obedience to their version of prosperity and natural balance. Today, we will discuss more proof of these money-lending shenanigans during the rise of the Greek Empire. Today, our story picks up and overlaps with our earlier episode about the Judean Murasu family of moneylenders who integrated themselves into the Babylonian life about 500 years before Christ. That earlier episode of A Bee in Eden, along with today's show, can be followed at our show page of the Sedona Deb blog. If you're listening to this on YouTube, just follow the link found in the video description to hop over to the companion page with all the pictures and links. Now, as we mentioned earlier, the story that was revealed in the clay tablets that were excavated at Nippur, Babylonia, drops off after telling us that the Murasu family firm realized that they had made powerful enemies of their mortgage clients, the noble landowners of Persia. Those feudal lords basically gave away their land as collateral for loans they had obtained from the Murasu firm. Those loans paid for the weapons and army that were used by their man Ockus to unseat the king down at the palace of Shushan, or also known as Susa. Ockus then became crowned as Darius II. But the noble landowners and the new king were saddled with hefty mortgages that pretty much left them forever indebted to the Murasu firm. Now, if you were the CEO of the Murasu banking business, what would your next move be? Obviously, you need to build protection around yourself. After all, if those landowners were willing to scheme against their king, well, they certainly wouldn't hesitate to come after you, their banker, with torches and pitchforks. As usual, these clever banksters turned this challenge into opportunity. Now that they had a taste for the delights of international credit and finance, they set their sights on none other than the temple of the goddess Athena, way down in Greece. Ironic, isn't it, that the Murasu firm transferred its affection from the home temple of Inanna up in Babylonia to yet another goddess figure in another land, Athena of Greece. Well, perhaps not so strange when you consider that these temples shared a common belief system and were doing business with each other based on lines of credit amongst each other. We'll take a quick break here, and then we will rummage around the attic of the Temple of Athena to see what we learn about the mysteries of empire building and money lending scrawled in the dust on her floor. We'll be right back.
Parents and kids love author Don Wynn's wholesome and delightful adventure stories. His picture books are modern fables written for today's families. Don Wynn's Circade the Boy Knight chapter book series is full of rollicking medieval adventure that appeals to even the most reluctant readers. Find out more at donwinn.com. That's DONWINN.com.
And we're back. To introduce today's story about the silver money in Athena's attic, I'd like to draw your attention to a news item that was published a couple of years ago. I have this linked within the companion blog for today's show at my blog page of sedonadeb.wordpress.com. The news story is still on archive with the website livescience.com. And the story was about a discovery, and the title of it was Athenian Wealth, Millions of Silver Coins Stored in Parthenon Attic. I'll read you the first 4 paragraphs from this article, and then we'll stop to ruminate on the implications of the Temple of Athena being used as an actual treasury. Here's the quote. Millions of silver coins may have been stored in the attic of the Parthenon, one of the most famous structures from the ancient world, a research team says. The attic of the Parthenon is now destroyed, and the coins would have been spent in ancient times. The researchers made the discovery by reconstructing the size of the attic, analyzing ancient records to extrapolate how large the reserves may have been, and re-examining archaeological work carried out decades ago. Their evidence suggests that millions of coins made up the cash reserves of the city-state of Athens, and much of this hoard was stored in the attic of the Parthenon. During the 5th century BC, when the Parthenon was built, Athens was a wealthy city-state whose people erected fantastic buildings and fought a series of devastating wars against their rival, Sparta. This vast reserve of coins would have helped fund those endeavors. The coin reserves were likely placed there around 434 BC, when the Parthenon was dedicated to Athena, the patron goddess of Athens. And that's the end of the quote. Now, did you catch that? It said this vast reserve of coins enabled the city of Athens to engage in a long, devastating war against a rival city-state, Sparta. Hold that thought on the back burner for a minute. Notice also that the coins were placed there once the temple was dedicated to the goddess Athena. Now notice that the researchers are puzzled over why so much money was stored here. Reading again from this same article, it says, ancient records mention nothing about where on the Acropolis the coins were stored, nor do they reveal the purpose of the Parthenon's attic. The sources are silent on the use of this space, said Pope at a presentation recently in Toronto. However, there are several reasons why researchers believe the attic was used to store most of Athens' immense coin wealth. While the attic is now virtually destroyed, the remains of a staircase that would have led up to the attic still survive. This staircase appears to have had a utilitarian rather than a ceremonial use, suggesting it could have been used to bring coins to and from the attic. Because the Parthenon was located centrally, people would have had an easier time securing and accessing the money there, and criminals would be less likely to steal the coins, as the Parthenon was a temple for Athena, meaning any theft from it would be considered a crime against the goddess. And that's the end of the quote. So there you go. It finished with the line, any theft from it would be considered a crime against the goddess. My friends, this is what the banksters back then and today want you to believe. If you meddle in their affairs, or if you even question their assumed power of money creation, you are committing a crime against the goddess. Even though it was the sweat of your brow, your productive efforts, along with the natural abundance of your earthly inheritance that made it possible for that money to exist in the first place. They want you to believe that you have surrendered your productive value to a goddess, like a sacrifice, that you owe her a debt, and they, as the bankster priesthood, have a duty to administer this debt as mediator between you and their God. And I assure you that in an upcoming show of A Bee in Eden, we will lay out the specific but twisted belief system they promoted to get your ancestors to believe all of that. But there was another reason why the banksters could not allow anybody to see exactly how much silver was in the temple. They were issuing false receipts against that silver, false receipts whose total was far in excess of what was actually in the Treasury for circulation into the general population. This is very similar to how paper dollars backed by nothing circulate in our own monetary system today. Let's reason on how we know that this practice of false money issuance was really happening in Athens. Remember the comment made in that article that researchers are puzzled over exactly what the use of this attic was for. The bankers were not very open about their activities. This same article does go on to quote from other resources that indicate that as many as 10,000 talents, or those big, large silver bars, could have been held in this attic. Now, if you have listened to the previous episodes of this show, of Being Eden, I think you can guess what those temple banksters were doing by hoarding such colossal sums of silver in the attic. Why, they were doing the same thing they do today, issuing credit lines and circulating fake money that was supposedly backed up by the physical mountain of coins up in Athena's attic. In other words, the physical treasury in the attic was storing 10,000 bars of silver, but the banker priesthood was issuing money, or actually credit, to the tune of 20,000, 30,000, or who knows, maybe 100,000 bars of silver. And why not? Nobody was going to come claim the actual coins because, after all, that all belonged to the goddess. Nobody gets to touch whatever belongs to the goddess. Just keep repeating those words. In Athena we trust. In Athena we trust. Now, do we have any proof that the temple banksters were really doing this? Yes, we do have proof by a simple process of deduction. I refer again to a book that I have quoted often, and which is available to you as a free PDF file in our show blog for episode number 1 of this show. That book was called The Babylonian Woe by David Astle, A-S-T-L-E, and I'm mentioning page 24. The author mentions the long war fought between Athens and Sparta that is now known as the Peloponnesian Wars. This was a conflict fought in segments over a 10-year time frame. Remember that the news article I just quoted said that the treasury of the Temple of Athena was used to fight that war. But what that article fails to mention is how much the war cost. From other archives that detail the later expenditures of Alexander the Great in maintaining his own army, we know that the yearly maintenance of an army back then cost about 6,000 bars of silver, and that cost is an annual fee. That means it cost them 6,000 talents of silver each year to maintain their army. Therefore, if the Peloponnesian Wars were fought over 10 years, how much did they cost? They must have cost at least 60,000 bars of silver. Now, friends, here is the key point. Listen carefully. The temple treasury of Athena is thought to have held the equivalent of 6,000 bars of silver, not 60,000. At the very most, they feel it would have held maybe as much as 10,000. So if the war cost 60,000 bars of silver, but the treasury only held at most 10,000 bars, where were the extra 50,000 bars worth of money coming from? My friends, it was coming from thin air, the same way the banksters create it today. They were issuing credit lines and fiat money to the warlords in many multiples of what was actually on hand in the treasury. But since nobody questions the goddess, the banksters got away with it. Additional proof is seen on page 26 of that book, The Babylonian Woe, by the fact that archaeologists have uncovered clay molds that were used to create coins out of clay that circulated as fiat money, in much the same way that this country of the United States issues paper money, which was, in the old days, backed by actual gold and silver in the national treasury. And that is what the author concludes, and I quote, "In other words, the clay facsimiles functioned in much the same manner as did banknotes over the last 300 years in the Anglo-Saxon world. They were money, privately created and emitted," end quote. Folks, we'll take our next break here, but let that thought sink into your brain. Communities suffered. Thousands of soldiers lost their lives. Economies were ruined in a long, drawn-out war made possible by fake money creation by a handful of banksters who likely finished the war with the same amount of silver coins they had started with, plus a mountain of loan obligations owed to them from powerful kings and their generals. All right, we'll take our next break here, and then we'll come back and wrap this up.
I've got the water, energy bars, and camera. I think we're set for the hike.
Almost. We need to protect our skin. Don't forget your wide-brimmed hat and sunscreen.
All right. I've got the hat. I've got SPF 30. Will that work?
Yeah, anything 15 or higher is good. Just make sure it says broad spectrum.
Great. Got it. I am not getting burned again. Let's go.
Learn more at cdc.gov/cancer.
And we're back. So today we have learned that the wars between Athens and Sparta were financed by 10 years' worth of fake credit that was privately created and privately controlled by that banker priesthood who always seemed to prosper after everybody else is dead. I'd like to connect the dots here to our previous story about that Murasu finance company from Babylonia and this immense profit generated from the money-lending activities under Athena's nose. Do we have any indication that those Judeo-Babylonian money changers were involved with the financial affairs down in Athens? Yes, again, deductive reasoning points the way. As our previous episodes showed, the Murasu firm financed the bloody revolt that saw King Darius II come to the throne up in Persia. A quick perusal of the Wikipedia article on his reign reveals that he was the man who helped ignite the conflict between Athens and Sparta. Let me read you this paragraph from Wikipedia, which is linked with on our companion blog page. Darius II gave orders to his satraps in Asia Minor to send in the overdue tribute of the Greek towns and to begin a war with Athens. To support the war with Athens, the Persian satraps entered into an alliance with Sparta. In 408 BC, he sent his son Cyrus to Asia Minor to carry on the war with greater energy. And there you have it. King Darius II, who you may recall was in debt to the Murasu firm, demanded payment of overdue taxes and tributes from his vassal territory down in Athens. To support his demand, the Persian king got Sparta to fight with him against Athens. Thus, once again, the perpetual cycle of debt, taxation, and war comes full circle. The Judeo-Babylonian moneylenders were laughing all the way to the bank as their balance sheets grew. Now, that credit line scheme at Athena's temple worked so well that it got recycled 100 years later during Alexander the Great's time. When that great king died suddenly, his empire was divided among 4 generals. Naturally, these generals all had money managers. A man by the name of Philoctetes was the money manager for General Lysimachus. He also became ruler in his own right of the highly influential city-state of Pergamum, a city so revered in modern history that Adolf Hitler enjoyed a recreation of her altar and a display of her artifacts at the Berlin Museum. I'd like to mention a fact about his life, as detailed in Wikipedia, and then show you that he was yet another adept in that secretive priesthood of credit creators. And this is also linked within our blog. This is about that man, Philetaerus. Quote, though nominally under Seleucid control, remember Seleucus was one of the other generals of Alexander the Great who came to dominate the other minor generals. Philetaerus, especially after the death of Seleucus, had considerable autonomy and was able, with the help of his considerable wealth, to increase his power and influence beyond Pergamum. There are numerous records of Philetaerus as benefactor to neighboring cities and temples, including the temples at Delphi and Delos. He also contributed troops, money, and food to the city of Cyzicus for defense against the invading Gauls. As a result, Philetaerus gained prestige and goodwill for himself and his family. Now notice this part. During his nearly 40-year rule, he constructed on the Acropolis of Pergamon the Temple of Demeter and the Temple of Athena, Pergamon's patron deity. End of that quote. Here again we see a man who wields the magic of credit creation, paying homage to the patron goddess of his treasury and temple, both Athena and Demeter. If we refer again to the book Babylonian Woe, page 144, we will quickly see the secret of his so-called wealth. This statement demonstrates this cycle of private credit inflation backed by a much smaller reserve of physical metal was the engine that kept powering the rise and fall of powerful men. The author wrote, Philetaerus proceeded to use the treasure to which he had so masterfully established almost total right with a skill which could only suggest training in the money shops of Babylonia or Alexandria, or as close advisor one so trained. The conception of the 9,000 talents of treasure in itself being the sole maintaining force behind the extended power of Pergamum would be quaint, to say the least, as quaint indeed as the story of those 6,000 talents of silver held in reserve in the Acropolis at Athens, as the sole finances with which the Peloponnesian War was fought. It might safely be said that the money power which enabled Pergamum to secure controlling interest over the cities of Patani and Cyzicus was not drawn from what might be left of that store of 9,000 talents or silver bars. Here's the point. It would have been part of a credit inflation which would have used the 9,000 talents as its base, and more than likely those interests holding the debt of the city of Patani were themselves indebted by another ledger entry transaction to Pergamum. That's the end of that quote. Therefore, my friends, this is how the story of the Murasu family continued through history, beyond what we learned through their clay bookkeeping records long after they died. We see evidence of men being trained in credit and finance up in those same mystery schools of Babylon and carrying their skills down south to Alexandria. As an extra treat, in our show's blog page, I have posted a link to a history documentary about the city of Persepolis. You might enjoy that story after we all return to our beehives today if you come over to my blog page. I was amused by a data point mentioned at the 16-minute marker of this embedded YouTube video. It is another point that the book The Babylonian Woe elaborates often, which is this: that evidence of the continued influence of Babylonian finance through all the Western world is seen by the fact that even in the rising power of Greece, the language of commerce and lending was Aramaic, not their native Greek language. Even the Babylonian standards in measuring weight of coins was retained. And in this history video, the multicultural empire of Persia had a rule in their vast assembly hall. The assembly hall could hold thousands of people, but to keep the confusion of languages under control, it was required to speak Aramaic during these big conferences, even though this forced the Persians to learn a language that was not their native tongue. I just had to laugh that the city name for the original confusion of languages at the ancient Tower of Babel had now, by the time of the Persian Empire, become the standard language of business, which united far-flung lands in their trade and commerce. Well, my fellow buzzing bees, the slant of the sun indicates it's time to return to the beehive. Many thanks to our sponsors and to Storytellers Campfire Network for providing this stage that lets us unravel the continued history of money creation and empire building. Soon we will talk about the propaganda these temple banksters promoted in the first place to get you believe that you owe them something that they took from you. Until next time, buzzing off.
When you don't go to Geico.com, car insurance can be hard. Like early 90s heavy metal hard.
I'm yelling and screaming and I'm loud. Roar!
Geico makes it easy. You can review and update your policy or report a claim on Geico.com or the Geico mobile app. Because shouldn't we all have a little less stress in our lives?
I'm not even upset about anything!
Jimmy John's, America's #1 sandwich delivery, fast Ed speaking. I'm on my way.
I'm in the backyard here, Ed. Wow, you are fast.
Yes, sir, freaky fast and freaky good. But I gotta say, I've never delivered to a dude in a doghouse.
Well, I'm definitely in the doghouse.
I thought in the doghouse was just an expression, a figure of speech.
Well, the doghouse is a very real place.
How long are you condemned to your canine quarters?
Too soon to tell, but on the bright side...
The doghouse has a bright side?
Yeah, the wife can't throw a lamp this far.
Oh! I guess she's been working out.
Order Jimmy John's sandwich delivery today. Jimmy John's. Freaky fast. Freaky fresh.